Hi there. So, last week and in the beginning of this week, we were learning about the people that lived in America a long, long time ago on the first Thanksgiving. And remember, we were studying the tribe, the Wampanoag tribe. And then we also were studying the Pilgrims yesterday to learn about how they lived. And I loved how you guys were doing such a good job at thinking and making connections about things that you had in common with the Wampanoags and things that were different, and things that you had in common with the Pilgrims and things that were different. Now that we've compared ourselves to the Wampanoag tribe and the Pilgrims to see how life is the same or different, we're going to compare them to each other. So now we're going to think about how are the Wampanoags and the Pilgrims living their life the same, and how are they living their life in a different way. So we're going to look at the Scholastic News. It's called Long Ago Neighbors. About 400 years ago, Wampanoag people were living in North America. The Pilgrims came to make a new home there. The two groups were neighbors. We can learn about how they lived long ago and about Wampanoag lives today. So we're going to start with the video, which is pretty short.
What holiday do you think of when you hear these words? Turkey, pumpkin pie, families gathering for a meal. All of these words may remind you of Thanksgiving. Let's learn the history of Thanksgiving. It all began about 400 years ago. There was a group of people who lived in England. We call them the Pilgrims. They wanted to find a new home. So they got on a ship called the Mayflower. They sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. The trip was long and hard. After 66 days, the Mayflower landed. The Pilgrims were in America. But their first winter was terrible. They had to build their homes. And it was cold. Many of the people had to live on the ship. Meanwhile, many native societies were already living in America. One was the Wampanoag people. They lived on the land near the Pilgrims' ship. The Wampanoag had been living in that area for thousands of years. They lived in homes called weetus. They planted corn, beans, squash, melon, and pumpkins. They hunted in the woods and ate food from the sea. From their homes on the land, the Wampanoag saw the Pilgrims' ship on the water. Winter passed. In the spring, the Pilgrims moved to the land. A Wampanoag man named Tisquantum came to the Pilgrims' village. He showed them how to plant the different kind of corn that grew in their new home. All spring and summer, the Pilgrims' crops grew. At the end of the summer, the Pilgrims had a lot of food. They celebrated with a big feast. Many Wampanoag people came to the feast. More than 90 native people came. They brought 5 deer to eat. The Pilgrims and the Wampanoag ate and celebrated together for 3 days. The Pilgrims gave thanks for the harvest. Today, people whose ancestors were Pilgrims still live in our country. These kids are modern-day descendants of the Pilgrims. The Wampanoag people still live here today. These girls are modern-day members of the Wampanoag Nation. Today, the Wampanoag give thanks for many different reasons. They give thanks when a new year comes. They also give thanks to celebrate the harvest of strawberries and corn. Every November, many people remember the long ago celebration with their own Thanksgiving feasts.
so we got to kind of hear the story about how the Wampanoags and the Pilgrims got to meet each other and how they became friends and how the Wampanoag tribe ended up helping the Pilgrims. And so today we're going to open up this Scholastic News magazine and we're going to learn a little bit more about some things that are similar about them and some things that are different. Okay, so how did the neighbors live? And we're going to compare them as we go along. So I'm going to compare the Wampanoag right here, and then the Pilgrims are going to be down here. So these are all the Wampanoags up here, and these are all the Pilgrims down here. So first we're going to talk about the homes that they lived in. So Wampanoag homes. Wampanoag homes were called weetus. Thumb up if you remember that. Awesome. People made them out of grass and branches. Families slept on beds inside. So really look carefully at this home that the Wampanoags lived in and what it looks like and what it's made of. Okay, now let's look at the Pilgrims' homes. Meanwhile, over in Pilgrim Village, Pilgrims made homes out of wood, clay, and dried grass. Adults slept on beds inside. Kids slept on mattresses on the floor. All right, thumb up if you remember that. Yeah, so think about how those homes look similar and how they look different. Okay, next we're going to talk about the chores. So first let's talk about Wampanoag chores. Kids helped pick crops like pumpkins, beans, and corns. They picked berries in the woods. They gathered sticks for the fire. So those are some of the chores that the Wampanoag kiddos did. And now let's see what chores that the Pilgrims did. Pilgrim chores. Kids helped care for the animals. They fed the chickens. They milked the goats. They also helped pick crops like corn and beans. So what do these things have in common? And how are they different? Okay, now let's see about Wampanoag fun and Pilgrim fun. Wampanoag fun. They rode in boats called mishoons. It was fun to paddle on a warm day. They might have ridden by a pilgrim village. And Pilgrim fun. Kids played games. They spun around. Sometimes they played by the woods. Wampanoag kids might have been nearby. Let's see them having fun, the Wampanoags, on their boat. Okay, so as soon as I said it, I felt super silly because I said boats, and remember, they're actually called mishoons. And so that boat that you saw was called a mishoon. And remember, they did that for fun, like on a nice hot day, maybe like what you like to do as well. Instead of going to the pool, they would get in their little boat. I wonder if maybe they got out and they got to splash around a little bit and have fun. And now we're going to look and see what the Pilgrims did for fun. So I'm going to click on that video. Okay, so remember that spinning game that we learned about yesterday? It's called Making Cheese. when they spin around until they fall down. And something else that I remember from yesterday's video too is the bowling that they do as well. They have those wooden pins that they like to knock down. I think it's called nine pin, maybe is how they played it or what it was called. But it was basically bowling. Okay, first grade, now that we've learned a lot about pilgrims and we've learned a lot about the Wampanoag tribe, I want you to think about what do they have in common with where they live, what they do, and how they have fun, and how are they different?